coming on the 5-year anniversary of January 6th. And are we any closer to the truth? That's the topic of today's Bold and Blunt. And I'm your host, Cheryl Chumley, giving you a Christian conservative look at today's news, politics, culture, and events. Go back in time, if you can, to January 6, 2021. And that fateful day on Capitol Hill, where there was, depending on your point of view, a protest, a rally, an insurrection, a violent surge of MAGA types, of angry MAGA types, ready to storm the Capitol building and take over the Capitol building. However you frame it, the fact is, here we are 5 years later, and we still don't know with 100% certainty exactly what happened on Capitol Hill on January 6th, 2021. And before I get into more of this, I want to quickly mention, if you like Bold and Blunt, you may get Bold and Blunt at edify.app. At Real Life Network, that is the faith-based news outreach of Pastor Jack Hibbs's Calvary Chapel, Chino Hills Church in California. You should go to RLN and check out all their great faith-based news offerings. I'm happy to say Bold and Blunt has been among their lineup for a number of years now. Very proud of that. And in addition to Bold and Blunt, you can also subscribe to all their other offerings there. Great site. You can also get Bold and Blunt, of course, at WashingtonTimes.com, where if you scroll to the bottom of the page and click on the newsletter section, sign up for my newsletter, The Best Of, I think it's called The Best Of, Cheryl Chumley. There's only one Cheryl Chumley, so if it's not called The Best Of, just look for Cheryl Chumley in my face, and you'll see it. Click on it, enter your email address, and you will have sent to your email box 3 times a week. That's Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. My newsletter, The Best Of Cheryl Chumley. It includes my commentaries that I write at WashingtonTimes.com almost every day, as well as my Bold and Blunt podcasts. Lately, I've been doing one audio podcast a week and one video podcast a week. I'm resuming the video this Friday. I have a great guest lined up. You're not going to want to miss her. And you'll also get whatever else I do at the Washington Times during the week. So sign up for that and be done with it, right? You can check it off your New Year's resolution list. You may also get Bold and Blunt wherever podcasts are available. I'm not going to talk long because I have a great guest and he has much to say about January 6th. Why? Because he wasn't just there, but he was imprisoned, right? He is one of those protesters / insurrectionists. If you happen to be a leftist listening to this, that's how you characterize those people on Capitol Hill that day. But they're not, right? They're American citizens who are exercising their First Amendment rights and freedoms and liberties that come from God, by the way, not government. And so my guest today is going to give a first-person account to the unbelievable things he suffered at the hands of our own government. But I want to quickly mention before I bring him on, whatever happened on January 6th, in your mind, know this. There were about 1,600 American citizens who were arrested and thrown in jail. And they all have stories of really tragedy that they can tell. And the tragedy is, if you think America is a nation of law and order where the government servants work for you, and that includes the law enforcement agencies of the federal, state, and local levels of government, well, listening to their stories, think again, because we really have rounded a corner in this country where it's no longer true to say that these public servants actually work for us, the people. It's really the other way around now. They have gotten it in their heads that they are the bosses of the people. And when it comes to the FBI, when it comes to the deep state feds, when it comes to the law enforcement at the federal level, it really depends on politics, on how you're treated. For instance, if there is a Republican in the White House, like now, who cares about law and order, the Justice Department and the federal agencies under that president are going to behave in ways that uphold law and order and recognize the Constitution as the go-to guide for how they govern, for how they act, for how they treat the citizens who pay their salaries, remember. If there is a Democrat in the White House like we just had, well, then you get like this travesty, these tragic tales that occurred to almost 1,600 American citizens who were just swept up, thrown in jail for what? Well, my guest today is going to shed some light on how the government was able to sweep up so many and throw them in jail, delay their trials, fabricate accusations against them, work in partnership with politicized judges to keep them in jail. And just listening to his story, if you can get through his story without feeling A, outrage, B, complete sadness, or C, a combination of both, then I don't know, are you human? Are you human or are you a bot? His name is Tom Caldwell. He wrote this book about his own, personal January 6 encounters, called The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6 story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. And boy, what a story it is. Tom Caldwell, I want to thank you so much for being on Bold and Blonde. So great to have you here.
Thank you so much for having me on the program.
So I can't wait to get into your first person account of January 6th, because here we are rolling around on the 5-year anniversary of January 6th, and you suffered firsthand in this persecution. Talk a little bit about what happened to you on January 6th.
Well, this book, I would just say, is an eyewitness account of one average guy, and I'm just an average guy, pitted against the counter state, and really all I had was my wife's love, an honest lawyer, which some people say is hard to find, and my faith in God. And my January 6th story is different from any other January 6th story that you're going to hear in a number of different ways. First of all, when I went to Washington, D.C. on January 6th, I never went inside the Capitol. I never broke any laws. I never surmounted any barriers, didn't do any violence, didn't see any violence. It was a day excursion with my wife, who was by my side the entire day. We went to hear the president speak. End of story. And yet, with zero evidence, I was accused of being the mastermind of January 6th, the top banana, the big cheese. And the FBI, with no evidence, raided our home in the darkness of the 19th of January, 2021, about 2 weeks after January 6th. They brought a SWAT team, a couple dozen body armor-clad thugs, an armored vehicle with a battering ram up against the side of our house, and very nearly, through their own bumbling, murdered my wife on our front steps. And that was just the beginning.
Oh, okay. There is so much there to unpack. So let's go back to what you said first. You said my book. I want to make sure and get the title in here now, because you wrote about this experience in your own book called The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. Now talk about a little bit more so people can understand. You didn't even enter the Capitol, and yet you were swept up for detention, for arrest. You had a 10-week trial, and you faced possible life imprisonment. How does that happen in America?
That's a really good question. And a lot of people are going to say, now, this couldn't happen. But it did. And it happens in the dark where most people can't see. Because in that secret tribunal behind closed doors, the Department of Justice attorneys falsified evidence, falsified exhibits, suborned perjury from their witnesses, including FBI special agents who lied under oath. They conspired to exclude evidence of my innocence. It's amazing stuff. And your listeners would be interested to know, get this, that the star witness for the government against me and 4 members of a community service group called the Oath Keepers was actually a convicted child sexual predator who traded his perjured statements against me and 4 other people at trial for a new identity and perhaps relocation assistance. So this is nuts, because the DOJ knew I was innocent the day they arrested me. And I'll tell you just briefly how I know that. Through discovery, we found out that during the 3-hour interrogation that I agreed to without counsel, they recorded it. And the FBI special agent who had the camera and the recording device would periodically hold his own cell phone up before the camera, and I could see the text messages going back and forth between he and the DOJ prosecutors. I was literally, once we got this stuff through discovery, once I had been tortured in prison, I was literally reading their mail.
Wow. Okay. So why you? You are a retired Navy lieutenant commander. And so I want to get a sense, I want you to answer that question, why you think it was you who were targeted, but also just get a sense, you and your wife up there on January 6th, just milling about the Capitol grounds, you go home thinking nothing of it, and then you get a knock on your door or a pounding on your door. Is that how it unfolded, the arrest?
Absolutely. And I think what happened is remember now the Oath Keepers, I know you know this, but
Yes.
most people don't, because, they just take what the DOJ gave to the media. But the Oath Keepers are a group of veterans and current and former law enforcement people that help in the local community before FEMA gets there.
Yes.
Like when there's floods and this, that, and the other thing. And yet, in this Fedsurrection, and it's being uncovered more and more all the time. And there's a lot here in the book about this, which comes from trial and other discovery stuff that wasn't entered in there. But we're starting to see what was really going on. They needed to have a group or groups to focus people's ire upon. The Oath Keepers were settled on, and a group called the Proud Boys. I know a little bit about the former and nothing about the latter, but I had actually met a member of the Oath Keepers. She was a veteran, an Army Ranger, who put in her phone when I said, hey, here's my number. If you're ever broken down on the Capitol Beltway, give me a call, because I'm just an old retired guy. She referred to me, as she put it in her phone, as veterans do. Not necessarily by your last name, but by the rank that you held. So when they flashbanged her home shortly after January 6th, she was a member of the Oath Keepers, they scooped up her phone, and then within 2 hours, they had a judge's signature on an arrest warrant for me, because the entry in the phone was Commander Tom, because I had been a lieutenant commander in the Navy. So they had the judge convinced that I was the commander of the Oath Keepers and the commander of the attack on the Capitol. You can't make up this kind of Keystone Cops bumbling. Wow. But it cost me and my wife an amazing amount. Really tried to ruin our lives.
Okay, so now let's jump to your home. What time was the stormtrooping of your home, and exactly what happened? Where were you and your wife? What were you doing? What was the first indication that you were going to be arrested?
Well, it was dark. It was the early morning hours. It was the 19th of January. This is wintertime, so it's still dark. About 5:45, something like that. That's when the FBI SWAT team came with the armored vehicle and all the thugs that I mentioned before. I was dragged outside, spotlights. I was chained hand and foot, thrown face down onto a government van. And then I looked back towards the door. My wife had also come out in the blinding lights. She's only in a nightshirt. Her hands are out to her side in full compliance. The FBI thugs with their M4 automatic rifles are screaming at her. She didn't know what they wanted. And I'll tell you, Cheryl, that's when I learned what true horror is. I saw what I call the devil's fireflies, the red dots of their rifle laser pointers dancing on her face and her chest. She was a finger twitch away from being blown away, killed on our porch. And I called out to God, Abba, Father, please don't let them murder my wife.
My God. Wow.
I'm sorry, I still can't talk about this without getting emotional. And, They dragged me away, and I waited in prayer for the rifle shot that, thank God, never came. They threw me into a vehicle. I was compliant. I didn't know how long I sat there just praying to God that she wasn't murdered. I didn't even know.
Tom, at this point, did you have any idea what was going on? Did they read you charges or anything?
Not until much later. They started the interrogation. Like I said, I said, yeah, okay, I'd like to have a lawyer, but I didn't have anything to hide. And so we started going, and I kept asking, what is wrong? Who have I offended? Why are you here? And when you see the transcript, and part of it is in the book, you're going to be outraged because I keep asking and they're dancing around it. And they finally said, well, we're arresting you for trespassing. And I said, you bring a SWAT team to my house for trespassing? You try to kill my wife for trespassing? What's this really about? And an FBI agent said, it's on the record. The American people have never seen it, but they'll see it in the book. They said, well, we're just here to confirm what the media says. I kid you not.
How many agents were there?
Well, there were at least 24 in the actual attack team, including those in the vehicle that later dismounted, and I could see them, and the guys with the M4 automatic rifles and all of that. There were other people, probably 17 to 19, that came through our house. We live out on a farm in the northern Shenandoah Valley, and they trashed our barns and our outbuildings, and they knocked doors off the hinges, and they're inside the house tearing things apart and scooping up personal items and stuff. So it was a major operation. We also found out that they had an attack drone overhead. I was never able to get the court to release that video, but boy, wouldn't that be great to see.
Okay, so you're in the van now. Did you say you were shackled? Did you say you were handcuffed? How did you describe it?
Yes, ma'am. They put a big, heavy chain around my waist, double handcuffs in the front, and then cuffed it to that chain, and then ankle chains on my feet too.
Okay.
And I was like that the entire time. They interrogated me in a small room in my home, and it's amazing because the FBI agents, as nasty as they were, they clearly knew even then that I was the wrong guy. And yet they were ordered by the DOJ to send me away to this odious little corner of Virginia. I didn't go to the D.C. gulag. I went to a place just as cruddy. It's called the Central Virginia Regional Jail in a little town called Orange, Virginia. How nice. And I was thrown into solitary confinement and tortured and told that the pain would stop if I would just tell her what she wanted to hear. And that was my first insight as to who was the primary, miscreant in this whole Shakespearean tragedy.
For trespassing. Wow.
For trespassing.
So let's, two quick questions. Where's your wife? Do you have any idea? How long was it before you knew what happened to her? And second, can you talk about, when you say torture, that's a strong word. Can you give details on that?
Yes, ma'am. It was a couple of hours before I knew that Sharon was okay. They actually dragged me through a part of my house, and there she was sitting on our couch. Boy, she had a scowl on her face. And she just wanted to know if I was okay. I just wanted to know if she was okay as they were looming over her with guns drawn. I kid you not. I use the term tortured in a very direct way because I was thrown into solitary confinement. Now, I was only in solitary confinement. I was only locked up for 53 days, which is nothing. It's a blip on the radar compared to years that other people spent. But I'm a disabled veteran. The first thing they did was deny me my life-sustaining prescription medications. I'm also on CPAP therapy, which means if I fall asleep but I don't have my airway open, I die in my sleep. So they denied me that. But if you think about the old 007 movies when they're trying to break somebody, that's what they did to me. I was in an ice-cold dungeon. I slept on the floor with a threadbare blanket. They had flashing light torture, sound torture, my physical contact with the guards. And bear in mind, this is not a nice little jail like the Wild West with bars. No, this was a concrete box with a steel door on the end and no windows. And when they really wanted to get to me, They would send the guards in and they would beat me where it doesn't show. And when they didn't get me to break under that, that's when they turned out the lights. Have you ever been on one of those tourist things where you go into a cavern or a mine and they turn off the lights to show you what absolute complete darkness is? Imagine being in that for days at a time in the freezing cold. That will mess with your mind. And the abuse, the physical abuse, I'm going to get a little spicy here, but the physical abuse at the boot heels and the pointy steel-toed end of their boots by the guards and the U.S. Marshal Service ensured that even when I was released, I was still bleeding from my manhood for months afterwards. That should chill all Americans. For nothing. I did nothing wrong.
This is so unbelievable to know that this is the United States of America. I mean, I'm listening to you, and I know you're telling the truth. It's just so hard to grasp the idea that this is a nation where government entities work for us.
Theoretically. Well, I will say this. This is a story of what happens when the government goes out of control and rages against its citizens. But it is more than that. It's a story of redemption. God does work in mysterious ways, because in my darkest hours, and darkness was upon me for sure, I had to recognize that through all of this and the kangaroo court, my fate lay in the hands of the Lord. And faith found me when I was at my lowest and brought me a little bit of courage and the right people to come into my life so that we could win against, well, evil, especially in court. Everyone has trials in their lives. Our story, my wife Sharon's and mine, could be helpful to anyone questioning their own faith and hope, because this is a book that could have been called The Mouths of the Wicked, A Modern Walk in Christian Faith. Right now in this country, justice is just us.
You do say that you emerge from this with your faith even stronger, which is miraculous in itself, and feel free to speak to that. But I also wanted to fill in the details of fast forward to when 53 days and you are released. How did that come about? What happened to everything that was destroyed in your home? Is there payback on that? Was it repaired? And were there any apologies that came?
Well, there's never been an apology, and there's never been a payback, and there's never been any effort by the government to come and repair anything that they did to the physical plant, if you will, of our home. It was awful when I got home to see the wretched remnant of the interior of our home, things torn away. The FBI spirited away, of course, all of our computers and flash drives and hard drives. They took personal notes. I am an amateur writer. They took my short stories and my screenplays, and claiming that they were a nasty manifesto because there was some military combat stuff in there from my time in the military and all that stuff. They took wedding photos. I mean, they just eviscerated our happy little home. My release came about when we got the right lawyer. We'd had a previous lawyer who just got rolled at a bail hearing. And of course, the DOJ lied about me during that hearing. But once we got a real lawyer, a guy named David W. Fisher out of Glen Burnie, Maryland, a good, strong Christian man, he showed the judge that the DOJ had lied to him about these things. There was no evidence indicating that I had done anything wrong. And in fact, the prosecutors had kept exculpatory stuff, including the fact I had fully cooperated with the FBI, from the judge. Now, the judge is the Honorable Amit P. Mehta. We're not pals or anything. He's just a judge. But I will say, once he was shown that this was a sham by Mr. Fisher, showing what the prosecutors had done, he said, look, there's stuff here that's very favorable to Mr. Caldwell. I'm going to release him. And the protestations of the prosecutors is enough to just make you grind your teeth. And he said, no. He says, I got the law. I'm going to apply the law. I was misled before. And so he released me. I will say to this day, again, Judge Mehta and all the judges in the D.C. Circuit, they got a lot of questions to answer. But I've never said anything bad in public about them or Amit P. Mehta, because Judge Mehta saved my life. If I had remained in prison, they would have taken my life, because I'll tell you what, the red light on my lifeline was flashing. And it was only my Lord and Savior that kept me going long enough to get to that bail hearing.
You've never received your wedding photos back or your short stories? None of that stuff has been returned to you?
Well, we haven't gotten the screenplays and the short stories and the love letters that I'd written to my wife and all that stuff. We did get some stuff back, mostly because it was shared with the whole world through Discovery. So all of our personal stuff, including beach photos of me and my wife, which people don't need to have. Those things were shared with all the other prosecutors and everybody else in the DOJ and all the other defense teams and hundreds and thousands of people. So we were able to get it back through Discovery, if you will. They give us copies of our own stuff on these janky password-controlled hard drives. But we try to put things together. It's funny, every time we turn around, we say, whatever happened to those, the pictures from our honeymoon? Well, we haven't got those back. Maybe we'll ask the FBI for them someday. So here we are, 5 years later. Gosh, Cheryl, it was only about 6 weeks ago that I got off the no-fly list. It has been a battle royal, and I think your listeners would probably like to know that a lot of people have not yet been pardoned, including members of the Oath Keepers and the Proud Boys. They haven't been pardoned, and they should be pardoned. But even if somebody gets a pardon, their lives are not put back together. Sharon and I mean, we're on the edge of bankruptcy, as we have been. I joke that, hey, I'm a lot like the young people, the Gen X or Gen Z nowadays. I've got a useless college degree. I'm out of work with no prospects, and I'm hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt. So that's where we are. It'll take forever, and we're on an empty farm now. Farm animals are all gone. Sharon had to sell our farm equipment for pennies on the dollar just to come up with $100,000 retainer for the first lawyer who did nothing for us. And our story is not unique in that way. A lot of people have had their lives broken. Now that Sharon and I are able to travel, we're actually getting a chance to meet other J6ers, and we're finding out some of them are homeless. Some of them, their families did not survive. They were broken apart. Their kids got tired of being bullied at school by the teachers for their parents' supposed transgressions. There's so much turmoil, so much pain. People can't get jobs because of the wokesters who are in the hiring authority, even in the trades. It's very, very difficult, and people are suffering all this time on. And the American people just want the truth. They want to know who did this, what crimes did they commit, and who was pulling the strings. And I do my very best in here because when I'm writing the book, and I should point out, I didn't write it in the clear, beautiful sunshine glow of victory, which we did achieve even before President Trump's, blessed pardon. I wrote it as it was unfolding. I was fearful that the FBI was going to come back and drag me away under false pretenses again. They lied to get me locked up the first time. So I was writing as it happened. When you read this is not something by an academician, even though I bring the receipts. When I tell you that the FBI agent lied when he said so and so and so, I'll give you part of the transcript, and in the endnotes in the back, I'll tell you the day. I'll tell you the page of the federal transcript. All of those things, so that it's all there. There's a lot of research done, but what it really is I'm taking the opportunity to show you what it feels like to be innocent and be set on all sides by the inequities of the selfish and the tyranny of evil men and women, and win. The monster of a corrupt nationwide injustice system was brought down on me and hundreds and thousands of our fellow citizens. It's still in place. But when truth and innocence and all of that can't help you, I had to learn to embrace a loving God.
What an outrage, though. What an absolute outrage. And I hope everybody reads your book, The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. And just one last quick question, Tom, before we're done here. Do you see any solution? Is there anything that can be done to ensure this doesn't happen again in America?
The first thing that I would like to see is the abolishment of what's called absolute immunity. The prosecutors and the judges operate in a world of absolute immunity, which means they can lie and they can cheat and they can steal and they can falsify evidence and they can do all of these things, and yet there is no recourse. They're never held to account. And that's really an awful situation. And I know that I can't be the first one who has gone through all of this stuff. People don't know what goes on in federal court. And it's been going on for a long time. I'm sure of it. And the prosecutors just do what they want to do, and the judges are in lockstep. Perfect example is one of the charges that was levied against most of the people, the 1512 C2 count. People were charged with a felony under an Enron statute. It was about financial crimes. Remember the old Enron scam where people lost all their money? And yet the prosecutors used that statute to charge people with criminality on January 6th. It was wrong. They knew it was wrong. They knew it was misapplied. And the judges in the D.C. Circuit knew it was misapplied, and they went along with it. It wasn't until the Supreme Court got their hands on it a year later and said, "Are you nuts? This is crazy." And they threw it out, which was helpful to me. I defeated at trial 3 bogus conspiracy charges that carried 20 years plus. And what they hit me with was this weird Enron thing, which was later thrown out by the Supreme Court. But by the time it was thrown out, people had already spent years in prison for that misapplied thing. So to wrap up a direct answer to your direct question, if we could get rid of that absolute immunity, or at least make some of these people who cheat like this on the public dole, make them open to civil damages when their abuses are exposed, I think that would give them pause. I think the specter of that alone would lead them to accept the removal of absolute immunity, and then start minding their business a little bit.
Tom, you have one of the most disturbing stories I've heard in a very long time. So much to think about there. I really appreciate you coming on Bold and Blunt to talk a bit about it. And listeners can get the rest of your story from yourself, your own words, The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. Tom Caldwell, thank you so much for being on Bold and Blunt.
And thank you for having me, Cheryl.
What a story. What a story, right? Sadly, there are so many more January 6th stories like that out there. I want to thank you for listening. Remind you, if you like Bold and Blunt, make it Bold and Blunt at edify.app, at Real Life Network, at WashingtonTimes.com, and of course, wherever podcasts are available. Tune in next time. In the meanwhile, don't forget, stay blunt, stay bold.